All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I am so glad to have you here this evening. I know, at least in Georgia, it is a very rainy evening. In fact, we are under a tropical storm warning. So, if you are in the path of this tropical storm, I am hoping that you are safe tonight. And you are dry and are taking cover. Apparently, it's supposed to be a doozy. But I thought that it was just super important for us to get on tonight and talk about this very, very important topic. So I am so glad to have you with me. And with that, let's get started. All right. So you are in the right place if you have signed up for a webinar entitled Five Things All Smart Parents Need Before Starting IVF. Okay. So let's just level set here. And I've got my Zoom family on with me as well. I just wanted to do this because I feel like when you're faced with the fact that you're even going to have to start IVF or do IVF, it's one of those things where you feel like it's so daunting, right? It just feels like this humongous task in front of you and it's full of question marks, full of unknowns that you're like, I don't know. All they told me was that there's some infertility diagnosis, and then now I have to go through IVF or I have to look into other forms of assisted reproduction. And I'm like, what in the world? So I totally get it, that it can be a bit overwhelming. But my job tonight, in the small amount of time that we have together, my goal is to provide you with some confidence where there once was uncertainty, some clarity where there once was some confusion. And so that is my hope tonight, that is what we will accomplish in the time that we have together. And so I love to make this very interactive. This is a conversation between the two of us. So if you have a question, and to my Zoom family, I see you. My assistant is watching as well. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. And then if you want to send me a private message, please do that. I look at those as well. And then to my family on Facebook, please do the same. If you have any questions you want to drop in the chat, please let me know. Please do drop them so I can be sure to answer your questions when we come to that time in our presentation. And then also to my folks on social media, if you know someone who needs to hear this information, please send them to this live right now because I don't want anybody to miss this very important information, particularly because we know that it is a topic of national conversation right now. It is on the ballot, and I want us to be informed with the accurate information. All right. So I've got a poll that I want to go ahead and show you all. For my folks on social media, it's showing there right in the banner on screen. And so to my Facebook fam, you all can also go to that same location. I'm also going to just drop it in the link for you as well so that you have it, and I've made it active. But this is just a way for me to kind of see where we are, where we're starting from and where we need to go. So let me drop it here in the chat for my Zoom family. So you should see it there. So I just kind of want to know, what stage of your fertility journey are you in right now? Right? So, what stage are you in right now? And, you could be at the very beginning stages. You could be, considering IVF. You could just be undergoing IVF right this second, and just need a bit of clarity about your journey. So, thank you so much for responding. But where are you right now in your IVF journey? You just drop your answers there in the chat. Fantastic. All right. So today, and it looks like we've got, let me just look at the results. So it looks like right now we've got folks that are undergoing IVF currently, right now. Okay, this is perfect. This will be perfect for you. So I want you to know what we're going to be covering today. So, remember, I told you about those 5 things that smart parents need to know before starting IVF. And what we're going to cover is body wisdom. And what I mean by that is really understanding your body as it relates to your fertility process. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about what I mean by that. The second thing we're going to talk about, which a lot of people don't always talk about when it comes to IVF, is financial intelligence. And I use the word intelligence on purpose, right? I want you to be intelligently informed, consciously informed about the financial obligations that you might face when it comes to going through the IVF journey. I know that that was something, at least for me, my clinic did a decent job of laying it all out, but there were a couple of hidden expenses in there that I wasn't necessarily expecting. And so I want to talk to you about that tonight. So I want to make sure that you have eyes wide open as you go into this journey. And then we'll talk about the art of conversation, how to talk to your doctor about what's going on with you, how to be an advocate for yourself through this journey, um, what things that you should be saying or mentioning to your doctor, as you walk through your journey, and those things that as a physician we're thinking about as you're going through your journey itself. Yes, we can't do a presentation about IVF without talking about mindset. We're going to talk about very briefly the success mindset, shifting your focus and your perspective when you're going through IVF. And then finally, we're just going to really walk through at a very high level the IVF process and what it entails. All right, so now that we have our agenda set, let's move forward. Okay. Before we get into the how, the nuts and the bolts as it relates to IVF and what's important, I want to start with your why. I want to start with the why. I said this to one of my students. My day job is I'm also a medical educator. I'm a physician, but I also teach residents and medical students. But it's so important, even for me at this stage, to still remember what my why is, because I can tell you that, most folks' experiences with IVF is not a straight line. It can be some twists and turns and some bumps in the way, but I can also tell you that it helps to remember what your why is so that when those times come, you are inevitably taken back to your core reason as to why you're going through this in the first place. It can feel like it's so much energy that you put into even getting to this place that sometimes you can really feel like, what am I even doing this for? Why am I spending all this time and this energy to get this thing that is still filled with so many question marks that I can't answer? Sometimes you may even feel like it's something you can't control. So in these times, it's often important to ground upon, like, what is my why? Why am I even doing this in the first place? Why are you willing to risk your comfort zone to get the baby you desire deepest in your heart? And you feel free to answer these questions. These aren't necessarily rhetorical, but please feel free to drop your answers in the comments. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. Why are you willing to put the time and effort into getting what you want, and more importantly, what you deserve? I really do feel like if it is your desire to be a mom, to be a parent, that can absolutely happen. If that is what you desire to do, it can happen. And I know how it feels to have that longing in your heart to want the thing that it seems like so many others so easily are able to obtain. And then you're stuck with, okay, but I have to do this very hard thing to get what seems like it should be easy to obtain. So I completely, completely understand. But I just want you to center for a moment on why you're willing to put in the time and effort into getting what you want, and more importantly, what you deserve. Now, here's an exercise in forecasting in the future. Sit with this for a minute. What will you feel? What will you look like? What will you be like when you hold your baby in your arms? And I ask you that question for more than one reason, because I absolutely do want you to be thinking about what's going to happen in the future. But this is also a way for you to show your brain that this is real. And I want to drive this home for you a little bit more. And during my journey, I had to do this by literally purchasing a onesie for my unborn, not conceived, haven't retrieved any eggs yet child. I had no idea that this was even going to be a reality for me. But because I also knew that I had to hack my brain into believing that this was going to happen, I actually bought a onesie with my daughter's name on it. Had no idea it was even going to be a girl. I hadn't even collected any eggs yet. But what I did was to say to my brain, this is happening. This is real. See, I can touch this onesie. I can feel this onesie. I used all of my senses to really imagine what that moment would feel like when I was able to put a baby in the onesie. And that did something, even down to a physiological level in my brain. And I'm happy to talk to you more about the neuroscience of this. It's so fascinating and amazing, and it absolutely is real. All right. So come back to me for a minute. I know you were in deep in forecasting what could happen in the future, and I am right there with you. But let's come back for a minute and talk about this whole body wisdom thing, understanding your fertility. So, one of the hardest things I faced was thinking my body was one way, only to find out it was different. And that's why knowing your fertility health is crucial. So, what do I even mean by that? So, as the story goes, when I was undergoing my fertility treatments, I happened, or when I got before I got started, I happened to visit my OB, and she essentially said to me, Maya, if you don't look into a fertility freezing your eggs, you're going to have to look into a sperm catalog in order to conceive. And at that time, I was like 34, and I was like, girl, I don't even know what you're talking about. Ain't nobody looking into nobody's sperm catalog. That is not what's going on here today. But what she did say to me was, Maya, really think about freezing your eggs. And so I looked into the process. I got started. I found a physician that I wanted to use to help me through it. I got started. And throughout the entire process, I kept being told, oh, you've got great follicles. This is going to be a great yield. This is going to be really successful. We're super excited. And so I showed up the day of to, have my eggs harvested. And I went to sleep thinking, oh, this is going to be a great yield. I've got so many follicles, only to wake up and the doctor tell me, Maya, we only got six. We only got six eggs, six mature eggs. And I was just like, wait, girl, what you talking about? Because y'all just told me I had all of these follicles. So, I had to gather myself real quick. And after I got over that initial disappointment that I'd gotten so few, I really started thinking back, and I was like, wait a minute, there's something not right about this. There must be something else going on. And then I realized, you know what? Before all of this, my periods have not been very regular. I've gained so much weight over this period of time. At that time, I was 230 pounds. I am 5 feet 4 inches tall. Okay. So morbidly obese at the time. And I started putting two and two together. And I was like, you know what? I think I have PCOS. And I feel like, Monday morning quarterback is so real. But I feel like had I known that information going into the first IVF cycle, I feel like things probably would have been handled a lot differently for me. Maybe my protocol would have been different. Maybe the way we approach this would have been different. Who knows? I mean, I can't change what happened in the past, but I did use that information to move forward for the next cycle. So when we did attempt it again, I was going in with complete body wisdom about myself. Like, okay, this is what's going on with me. This is how we may have to adjust my protocol, my medications, my dosages, etc. And so it's so important to be super in tune with your body. And let's connect that to like what your doctor wishes you know before you actually walk into their clinic. When you actually are aware of what's going on with your body and any diagnoses that you may have or you may be considering, or any signs or any symptoms that you may be experiencing, your doctor can take that information and say, okay, so yeah, we might be dealing with PCOS. Or, oh, you may be having signs and symptoms of an overactive thyroid or an underactive thyroid. Anything that could be affecting your fertility treatment. Your doctor is now the wiser about that. You are too, and that can make your subsequent IVF cycle that much stronger because everybody is aware now. So that's what I mean, by that body wisdom. And I really want to just take a note here, and I wrote down some notes so I can make sure I don't forget anything. But I want you to actively seek out the information here and ask your doctor about your fertility status. And this is something your OBGYN can help you with before you even get to the reproductive endocrinologist. This is something even your primary care physician might be able to help you with as well. But it's important to understand what's going on with you physically before you go to that physician, the reproductive endocrinologist, to get started with your IVF. Okay. All right. So, with that, it is yet time for another poll. I love these. My students probably are like, really, Dr. Maya? So, how confident are you in understanding your fertility health? And you can just drop your answers to this one in the chat. How confident are you in understanding your fertility health? Like, yes, I'm confident, not really confident, could use some help, some additional help with this. So, where are you on the scale of confidence when it relates to your fertility health? All right. So let's move now and talk about financial intelligence. So I'm going to talk to you about one of my clients that I was helping, go through her IVF journey. And at the time, like she had completed, I think, like 4 or even 5 cycles of IVF at that point, and all of them had failed. And so, of course, I'm sorry, I'm going to take a bit of tea. And of course, by the time we got in touch with each other, she's like, Dr. Maya, like we have spent so much money on IVF. Like I just can't justify spending any more money without knowing that this time is going to be different. And so she was obviously overwhelmed. She and her husband were overwhelmed by this financial burden of IVF. But once we carefully kind of sat down, planned it out, she was able to focus on her journey with clarity. So, what did that look like? What did I do with her to kind of help her look at some of the hidden costs that may not always be revealed before you go through this journey? So, most clinics will at least give you a good breakdown of their estimated cost of one cycle. So, for instance, my clinic all in, it was going to cost me about $19,000. Okay. Now, this was 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, but it was $19,000 then. Now, usually the rate in the United States can vary from about 12,000 to even upwards of 20,000 and more. It just really depends on the clinic. It also depends on if you have insurance, what that insurance coverage is. So once I got those numbers and I asked them to itemize everything. So I asked them to just list out every component of what that $19,000 amount entailed. And for instance, we opted in to do genetic testing. Well, that's not always covered by insurances. That was an out of pocket expense. My husband also had to have a procedure that also was not covered by insurance. So that was about $6,000 additionally out of pocket expense. So, what I first recommend that you absolutely call your insurance company first. Look over your policy, but call the insurance company and have them go over with you what your coverage entails. And then compare that to what your doctor has planned for you and what the financial office has given you as a plan for, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. And then compare the two. And so then okay, at least I've got to cover this gap, and how are we going to creatively cover it? And then The other thing that most insurance companies do not provide is medication coverage. Now, if they do, some will wrap it all into what's called your lifetime benefit. They'll give you a dollar amount for lifetime that might include medical and medicine, so the actual procedures and the medications, the drugs. But then some, like our insurance that we had at the time, they separated it out. So I had a allotted amount for medications. I had a allotted amount for the procedure itself. And what I did not expect was that the second time I went through IVF, typically when you're undergoing a stimulation cycle, and we'll talk about this later on when we talk about IVF as an overview, typically it lasts 7 to 10 days. I actually had to go 14 days to stimulate my ovaries. So that meant I needed extra drugs, which meant that wasn't covered under my insurance. And I had to pay out of pocket expenses for those extra medicines. And some of them went unused, but you don't know, kind of what you're going to be dealing with the stem cycle until you get in it. And so that's what happened to me. I actually had to go to a pharmacy that I could get the medication the same day. Usually it's shipped to you from a special pharmacy, but I was able to go and get the medicine that day. And that also incurred an extra expense. So it's just those little small pieces that you don't necessarily think about when you're starting out. That you're just thinking it's going to be, oh, $19,000, but there's also some other expenses that you might be dealing with that is important to plan for. So that's what I mean, about that financial intelligence. And just like we talked about, understand your treatment options and cost, explore insurance coverage, call your insurance company. And I forgot to tell you all this. So initially, my insurance company approved my IVF coverage and the procedures that I needed. And then I actually decided to choose another physician to go through with the process. More to that story. And they actually denied it. They turned around and denied it. So I had to appeal to the insurance company to get them to cover the IVF cycle for me. It was a long and harrowing ordeal. Like, I'm already dealing with the fact that I have infertility and I got to use IVF to conceive. And now you're telling me I'm responsible for the whole $19,000. It was a lot. It was a lot. So we finally did get it approved. We won the appeal and they reimbursed me, but I had to come up with that $19,000 out of pocket up front. And so a lot of practices will require that as well. So it's important to have that in-depth conversation with the financial team at the practice that you choose. And then, create a financial plan. So I had to cut back on a couple of things. Like, I couldn't get my monthly subscription to a subscription box, for a while. Just other things that I had to pull back on. And, you wouldn't think that those things made a huge difference, but they really do add up in the end. So it was important for both of us, my husband and I, to look at where we could cut back that made sense, right? And then seek financial advice or support if you need it. Now, some people may not tell you this, or they may not feel like it's something you should do, but it's 2024. And I would almost venture to say that you have people in your corner that if they knew that this was going on and this is what you needed to do, they'd be willing to help to support you. So asking friends and family is what we had to do. And it actually did help. It helped. Now, we reimburse a lot of folks, especially once we got reimbursed from the insurance company. But initially, with that initial $19,000 that we had to pay up front, it was helpful to ask family members to help. And that made the difference and didn't make it feel like it was so heavy of a burden, right? Okay. All right. So now let's move on and talk about the art of conversation. This is a big one. Now, even me as a whole physician, I see patients all day long. I used to be a private practice physician, saw patients in clinic. I mostly work in the hospital now. But when I went to see the reproductive endocrinologist, these are like my colleagues, white coat syndrome was real. Like I don't know. I could not get my thoughts out. I could not gather them, get them together to even think about what questions I needed to be asking. Um, it just felt like that 20-minute visit just flew by, although I'm very sure that my physician was very, very thorough with me. But I just was like, I just can't, it was a lot. I just cannot explain it. It was just a lot. And so, some of the things that you may want to think about asking your physician when you're going in to see them, and I've got a whole nother checklist that I'm happy to share with you all later about what some of the things you need to ask. But you want to ask them about the success rates for someone your age, super important. And also, this data is published in the CDC with the CDC. So the CDC keeps track of this information. So you can actually go to their website and look it up according to your clinic. So they do report the success rates. It's important to know for your age group what they are. You want to know what tests you might need to undergo before you actually get started with your IVF process. Super important, again, to know exactly what you're dealing with from the very beginning, so that there are no surprises when it gets to, when the rubber meets the road. How should you prepare physically and emotionally for IVF? So for me, that meant physically, I needed to lose some weight. I was 230 pounds, 5 feet 4 inches, morbidly obese. Even a 10-pound weight loss would have helped me. So I needed to make sure I did that. And then here's the other question nobody really wants to ask, but what happens if IVF isn't successful on the first try? And I feel like this is an important question to ask because you go into it so hopeful that the first time is going to be the only time you're going to have to do it. But in reality, most people have to undergo more than one cycle in order to be successful. And so it's important to kind of know, what that physician's strategy might be should you not be successful that first time. And so it might mean that they have to adjust, and it might mean they have to change protocols. Just one moment. I'm sorry, my little thank you, honey. Charlotte, mommy is in a meeting right now. I know, baby. I know. I know. Thank you.
I'll make you some spaghetti.
Thank you, baby. Can you give it to dad? Well, you can go with daddy, mommy. Be down there in just a minute. Okay. All right. My little assistant loves to join me in my meetings. So, but she again is the reason why I do all of this. She's super, super important, super, super important. So, but she loves to join me. She loves to say hello to her internet friends. So, I let her. She needs to see mommy do some of these things. But she is the person that I prayed for and quite honestly manifested on this side of the earth. And I'm happy to share more about that and how my husband and I, and with God's help, we made it happen. So, but as I was saying, it's important to get that physician's perspective, like what's going to change, if we're not successful this first time. Because again, you don't want to waste your time and your effort. Although you're willing to put it in, you certainly don't want to waste the time and effort it takes to get to your intended goal. All right. So, what's one question you've always wanted to ask your doctor, but you may have been afraid to ask? Okay. So just you feel free to drop it in the chat. And then if you want to just kind of think about this, jot it down. So the next time you go to see your physician, you know that you have, a question that you want to ask, and make sure you don't forget that. Go ahead and jot that question down. Just think about it. Tea is my friend today, especially on rainy days. I love tea. All right, so let's move along and get to the success mindset. All right. So I know that everybody, every coach, every consultant, and their mama is talking about mindset these days. It is a hot topic. But what a lot aren't talking about is really the neuroscience behind it. And it is real. It does happen. It can happen for you. It has happened for so many other people. And so I want to make sure we at least touch on this because this really is the foundation of where I start with my clients when they come with their wanting the help and assistance that they need, helping them get through IVF. And I have served clients who've gone through multiple cycles of IVF, have had, horrible, previously horrible outcomes. And I am so happy to say that I've helped them to become mothers today. And I dare say that it's because we did a lot of mindset work that they were able to shift not only what they were thinking here, but they literally will be able to shift those thoughts. And that changed the way their bodies were moving and the way their bodies were working. And it opened up an entirely new world, and opened up entirely new opportunities for them to conceive via IVF. Now, it may sound real woo woo, but it is the truth. It is absolutely the truth. It's what I did in order to bring that little girl that you all saw to this earth. And so it's important to develop that growth mindset. It's certainly important to manage your stress and emotional resilience. I say that because when I was going through the process, I was dreading calls coming from the clinic. I mean, literally would get a pit in my stomach and something caught in my throat because I had no idea what was going to be on the other end of that. And, sometimes it was good news, sometimes it was not so good news. And so, like, I had, though, to develop this growth mindset, not fearing failure, but believing in success. And that is super key because a lot of times you're going through this. Again, there's a million question marks. You're fearing failure, but not believing in the success. And so it does make a difference when you make that subtle shift. And that's what I work with my clients on, getting them to make that shift. All right. So, what to expect in the IVF journey? Now, it was not until my second round of IVF that I truly understood what to expect. And that made the difference in how I approached it completely. Now, I mentioned to you earlier about my whole diagnosis with PCOS. I didn't get diagnosed until after that first round of IVF. But understanding, I had to, and this will sound weird, but I had to understand when I failed, I had to understand why before I understood, okay, here's where we may need to adjust my strategy. Let me ask my doctor about these things. And then what do I need to change about me emotionally, physically, mentally in order to do this again? Because I know how hard it is to go through cycle after cycle, just getting hit. It feels like you're just getting hit with punches left and right, and you're reeling from it all. And so I completely understand how difficult it is to even regroup in order to gear yourself up to do it again. It's like a boxer being knocked out. You're like, I don't want to get up and do this again. But then sometimes there's still that feeling inside of you. It's like, but I have to do it. I can't give up. I still want my baby. And I am here to submit to you today that if that is what you desire, that is what you want, it can happen. It can come true. And that is where, shameless plug, that is where Dr. Maya comes in to help you along the way. You don't have to do it by yourself. You don't have to do it alone. I am absolutely here to support you throughout your journey. So, with that said, let's get a detailed look at the IVF process. All right. So I like to think of this as like a broad 5-step process. And again, I emphasize this is very broad. This does not go into the nuances of it at all, but this is what I do when I coach my client. We walk through each of those nuances. When sometimes there's challenges that come, we navigate through it all. And so the first step is you're going to go through ovarian stimulation. You're essentially saying to your ovaries, make more eggs. You do that by using medications to stimulate the ovaries to do just that. Then you're going to go through egg retrieval. You're normally asleep while this happens, but the physician will go in, retrieve the eggs from the ovary, hand them off to the embryologist who will complete step 3, which is fertilizing them. So putting them with the sperm, creating the embryo, and doing what most people will choose to do is a frozen embryo transfer. Now, there are so many steps that are involved in that process. The embryologist really is the gem of the show. They are the star in this entire thing because they're the ones, after the doctor extracts your eggs, they're the ones that's creating that embryo for you. And brings me to another point. So when I was searching for clinics to choose, I actually wanted to know who their embryologist was. I wanted to know how much experience they had. I wanted to know, how much, how long they've been with the clinic, what their certifications were, because again, it was important to me to know like who my eggs were in the care of in the lab. And I'm so thankful that I have an embryologist friend that comes to my group and talks to my ladies about what goes on behind the scenes. Because the more you know, you really are that more prepared for what can happen. You're taking a situation, a process that has so many question marks in it, and you're distilling these question marks because now you know what really goes on and the choices that and decisions that you may need to make. So then after the embryo is created, then you have to prepare for transfer. And that involves a whole nother set of medications in order to prepare your uterus to receive that embryo and implant nicely. And then once you do that, there's that dreaded 2 week wait game. And don't be like me during this 2 week wait and still take the pregnancy test when they told you not to. Don't do that. But again, this is where coaching, consulting comes in to help you through that 2 week window because it can be harrowing to get through until that first pregnancy test when you go in to see your doctor. So absolutely important to just get this overview of what to expect so that you're not going in completely blind. All right. As I kind of alluded to earlier, not every cycle is going to be successful. I know you don't want to hear that, but it's important to at least know that every cycle might not be successful. I'm not saying yours won't. Yours might be successful the very first time you try. But I just want to keep in mind it may not be successful. Emotional ups and downs are part of the process, unfortunately. It's something it's a science, it's an art, and it's not exact. And so no one can guarantee you anything in the process, but at the same time, you can prepare yourself for the roller coaster. Even if your successful, your cycle is successful, it's still important to at least understand that emotional ups and downs are still a part of the process and that you can get through those successfully. And then staying resilient and then focused on the long-term goal. Super important. All right. So let me just share with you. I know I told you earlier about some of the clients I've been so honored to be able to walk this journey with, but I just want to bring this on home before we wrap up here. So my client had been through multiple unsuccessful IVF rounds and really just was ready to give up. She told me, she's like, Dr. Maya, you are the very last hope that I have. I don't have it in me to do it again, but I'm going to try it one more time because I feel like this could work for me still. I'm not ready to give up. And so together we got really clear about what her goals were. We did the mindset work. We talked about alternative things that she could do. We talked about the alternative resources she could utilize in order to increase her chances of conception via IVF. We talked about, of course, looking at her diet, her exercise, her emotional, mental strength and fortitude, like all of those things were super important. And even in her journey, she had to take a break because she was becoming just so overwhelmed by like what the way her body was responding. It wasn't like it had responded before. And so it threw her off. And I completely understand it. But that's where the coaching and the consulting came in. I was right there with her to even walk through the pause. And then when she decided, I'm ready, she was ready. And for the first time, she went through her 2 week wait successfully. And she went through it in a much better mental, physical, emotional state than she'd ever done before. And she carried her baby to term and delivered. And this past Mother's Day was her very first Mother's Day that she was able to experience. And it will bring tears to my eyes because I was so grateful. But she sent me a small little token in the mail and said, it was a little plaque with a heart, and basically thanking me for helping her to get through those hard times when she was just ready to give up. It was right then when she was able to conceive her miracle baby. And now her child is doing extremely, extremely well. And I am just so excited um, to be a part of the process in some small way. So I want to know at the end of this, and I hope that this was something that was of value to you and that you at least gained some clarity. Remember, we said at the beginning that my goal was to help you create some clarity out of the confusion, and some confidence as you go into your next IVF cycle or your first IVF cycle about what to expect. And there's no way that I could go through all of the little things that's so important for you to understand in this short period of time that we have together. And I will tell you, I am so happy to talk with you if you are wanting to take that next step. You're just curious about, Dr. Maya, what can I do? What are my options? Um, Again, there is no sale on this call, there is no pitch on this call. Unless you want to move forward with that, there is none of that. There's simply me talking to you about your unique situation and what's going on with you and your journey to see how I can help. Because sometimes when you're in it, you can't even see the forest for the trees. And, sometimes it helps for someone else to think about your situation and give you their best recommendations about how to move forward so that you can move forward clearly and without the muddiness and the fogginess. Sometimes you can't think clearly when you're going through something that can be feel so heavy as this. So I want to invite you to go ahead and book your free consultation with me today. Again, this is a no pitch consultation. Dr. Maya is not selling anything. I'm happy to share with you what I have to offer, but that is not my primary goal. My primary goal is to help you. And I've dedicated my life to a life of service, and that is exactly what I want to continue to do and do here with you in your fertility journey. So if you're ready to take that next step, come on. My calendar is wide open. I'm going to drop the link again in the chat so that you all can see that. Um, Please, let me just copy it here from my Zoom family. Perfect. And I also just want to say too, like, I know that sometimes, when you go on these webinars and, first of all, I know people are just so sick of webinars these days. And I totally get that too. Like, people are done with them. And I totally get it because, especially us coming out of COVID now, we're just all zoomed out, all webinared out. And then a lot of what's happening on the online space is people starting online businesses trying to sell you something. And quite honestly, we're in an economy where people like, honey, I don't know. I cannot justify the expense. And I completely understand that because it's happened to me too. And what I had to say to myself, even realizing that this is what it was, like, how willing am I? How much am I willing to invest in this problem in order to get to the solution? And for me and for like many of my clients, they realize investing in themselves so they could have the outcome they wanted, which was that baby. Remember we talked about that baby in your arms? It was well worth it for them to do it. But let me just say to you, I completely understand. And so, but this is not that. Dr. Maya is definitely here to help you and then continue to advocate for us as we go through this IVF journey and infertility as a whole. So, with that, I am going to pause here and see if we have any questions. Any questions in the chat? All right, let's see. Let me check out my Zoom family. I don't see anything from anyone there. And let me check here on social media. I don't see anything here, but you all know where to reach me. My calendar is wide open. I'm willing and able to help. And that's all I want to do is to give you some clarity on your journey. So, with that, thank you so much for spending your Wednesday afternoon with me. I really appreciate it. And you know where to find me. My email is maya@thedoctorswomb.com. My website is www.thedoctorswomb.com. And you can text me 678-284-2477. I get all of those messages. I'm the only one reading them. And I am here to help. You are not alone. You don't have to go through this alone, whether it's your first time or your 13th time. You don't have to do it alone anymore. So, with that, I will bid you all adieu and you all have a great evening. I'll talk to you very, very soon. Take care. Bye bye.